But designers don't do that. Now, I think designers ought to be in charge of the world in some sense, but you can't do that because you're a great designer. I can do great sketches, or I can know, my design skills are wonderful. No, you better be good manager, and you better understand the world and business, and you better understand politics. Ooh, politics. No, I don't want to care about politics. No, politics are good. I mean, politics are often done badly.
Yeah.
But the notion of politics is because when you get groups of people together, let's suppose they're all trying to collaborate and they all are doing the best they can, but they come from different backgrounds. And so what they believe is right or what is needed often conflicts with what others do. And probably every one of them is correct from their point of view. And so the art of politics is figuring out how to work together, how to get them to see the other points of view, and to find some kind of solution that makes them all happy. And that's what's essential. And I don't see why designers shouldn't be that kind of person, because there are other groups that do this, but they always emphasize money or schedule. And we emphasize quality of life.
Fractional is the show for world-class consultants in AI, software engineering, product, and design. Don Norman was the founding director of the Design Lab at the University of California, San Diego. He's co-founder of the Nielsen Norman Group, a member of the National Academy of Engineering, and former vice president of Apple. His latest work expands the notion of being human-centered to consider the impact upon the environment, upon all cultures, and upon quality of life, humanity-centered. This is explained in his latest book, Design for a Better World, Meaningful, Sustainable, Humanity-Centered. His most popular introduction to design was through his book, The Design of Everyday Things. Don Norman is now busily engaged in his 5th retirement, busy helping run his charity, the Don Norman Design Award and Summit. In this episode of Fractional, we discuss what he got wrong about human-centered design, how designers should shift from being colonizers to helpers, principles from Apple for design practitioners and consultants, and how designers like you and me can change the world. This is Alexis, your co-founder from Swarm. Please enjoy the episode.
Great. Hello, Don. Welcome to our humble hacker house, and welcome to our podcast.
Not so humble.
Not so humble. Thank you so much. Welcome to Fractional.
Welcome.
All right. So, Don, you've been the pioneer of user experience. You've written so many books. And now, as I see it, it looks like your focus is on humanity-centered design, right? It's a big, kind of like a shift from, user-centric design, like a narrow focus to something really global. Can you explain to us how your thinking has changed over the years?
Well, my thinking changes all the time because, well, you've already noticed when I came into the studio, I'm curious about everything. I've looked at everything. I poked every wire. I looked at the camera. I looked at the microphone. And I look at the world. So if you look at my history of books, well, they started off as psychology books about how people learn, about how people pay attention. And then it moved on to a different topic. Every book was a different topic because I was learning new things. I like to live a life where I don't understand things. And so I find things that I don't understand that I find interesting and important, and I try to understand it. And when I finally understand it, I write a book. And when I'm all finished with the book, okay, finished. Now I try to find something else I don't understand. So I sometimes think that my students think I'm stupid because I don't ever know what I'm talking about because I'm always in the middle of these I don't understand topics. Well, so the point is I've changed fields many times, but in many ways I didn't change because I started off as an electrical engineer, but when I accidentally got into psychology, I used my engineering background to have a different perspective on psychological phenomena than other people, simply because I brought the one field into the next. And I found that as I switch fields, that's very valuable. That what I've learned in one area, but I apply it in the next area, people say, oh, that's so brilliant. No, it isn't. It's something that's well known in one area, just the other people didn't know about it. So, but to make it short, I eventually got involved in the design community and found that a really wonderful match for what I care about, because I'm trained in engineering. I understand science and engineering. I've been a business executive, so I understand how business works. I'm a psychologist, so I understand quite a bit about people and people's behavior. And so all this fits together. It's really is a perfect background for a designer. So I was never trained in design. I use all these other things to look at design from my own perspective. Well, I've retired 5 times. And with each retirement, though, I move into a new job or a new activity. And the last retirement was my 5th retirement. And then I said, maybe this is a real retirement. I don't want another job. I'm happy, busy. But what should I do? Well, when people ask me what kind of a designer I am, I didn't know how to answer it for a long time until I finally discovered the real answer. I'm really an educator. And so people say, what have you ever designed? I design designers. Well, what I try to do is to take the knowledge that's required to be effective at design, and I write different books that look at it from different angles. And I'm mostly known for making books that tell you how to make something easier to use or easier to understand. And as I thought about it, oh, this may be my last book. And yeah, it's important to know how to design things that people can use well, but that's not going to change the world. And the world is a mess. And so I started thinking that, well, maybe I would write about the problems that we face in the world. But as I looked around and I read books and talked to people, the problems are well known and well understood. Okay, we should talk about the solutions. But it turns out the solutions are well known and understood. So, well, how come we're not doing them? So that's what I wrote the book about. But I focused only on the things I felt I could give a new perspective and that was useful. And so I also have a philosophy of not criticizing anything that's being done unless I know a better way. And so in every case where I talk about what I think are problems in the world, I also talk about really good solutions that have been proposed by other people. And I like the fact that in some sense there's nothing new in the book, because it means that when I talk about the problems, it's just not some person like me saying something. Other wise people have said it before. A lot of very eminent people have always criticized the economics in the world, for example. And when I talk about solutions, they come from other people too. So it's not just crazy me with an answer. But what I try to do is put it in a historical perspective. So I also talked about the history of how the world got to where it is today, which includes the development of, for example, the capitalist system as it is today, and the economic system, which is historical. It didn't have to end up the way it is today. I talked about the history of colonialism, and which was highly impacted, in fact, maybe mostly controlled by the economic interests of countries in Europe, Britain, the Netherlands, Italians, the French, all who wanted to get more money. And so they went around the world and they found, and they took over countries, but all for the benefit of trade and for taking all the products of the countries and bringing them into Europe. And
we are one example of that here in the Philippines.
All the countries in this area of the world are examples. Actually, the United States is too, except because it was colonized as well mostly by the British, but also the Spanish and the French. But we then became a colonizer ourselves. So I decided to write this book, and I started off with, I remember the real insight is I looked out of my window, and I'm on a fairly steep hill, so it means I can see quite far in the distance, and I'm facing south in San Diego, which is the most southern western part of the United States, the main, what we call the mainland part. So, and I can see the Pacific Ocean, and I can see what's called Mission Bay, which is a recreational area of water, and I can see the city of San Diego, and I can see the mountains of Mexico. And I said, almost everything is artificial. Mission Bay, which is a wonderful recreational area, used to be a swamp. And I look outside and I have a nice lawn, and there's lots of trees, palm trees, and there are animals. But the animals are real, but it's a steep hill. So they had to make it level to put the house in. And all the trees were planted, and all the plants were planted, and the roads, of course, are artificial. And that's what makes it possible for the animals to live here, and for that matter, people. And when I look out, the city is artificial, and everything else that's there is artificial. And the mountains of Mexico, well, the mountains are real, but Mexico, that's artificial. So almost everything in the world is artificial, and it means it was designed.
The notion of a country or state or those kinds of things.
All the laws, they're all done by people, made by people. It's interesting if you look at laws. Almost all laws are after something bad happens, people pass a law against it, or people are doing something that the legislatures don't like, so they pass a law against it.
Mindset.
In general, if you want to know how people behave, look at the laws that tell you what not to do. The reason it tells you what not to do is that's what people are doing. So that was the beginning. But I looked at the history and I tried to understand how we got to this point and what we could do to change it. And the problem is that to change it requires changing everything. So,
like incentives.
The incentives are the worst part because the incentives are behind everything. You have to change the economic systems, but because it's giving the wrong incentives to people now in the companies of the world look at short-term profits as opposed to what's good. First of all, what's good for society or good for people, and we look at the gross domestic product of a country, which is how much money a country is spending every year. And if you spend money for evil, it doesn't matter. You're spending money. That's good. And then say the government has to clean up the evil that you've done. Well, they spend money to do that. So that's good. So evil counts twice.
Yeah. Like people don't look at the qualitative aspects, or let's say, I think you argue in your book that narratives, storytelling, those are impactful things to look at, to really look under the hood.
Yes. So I want to emphasize quality of life over profits. And do profits matter? Well, yes, because a company has to stay in business somehow. But quality of life ought to be first. And the other thing is we have to take a long-term view. And I looked at what I've been teaching for many years, human-centered design, the book Design of Everyday Things, which has been out for 20-some-odd years. More than that, 30 years. It teaches... And I say, that book is wrong. And there's nothing in the book that's wrong. I think the principles there are important, and they're still true, and I still teach them. What's wrong is what's not in the book. And so we never worried about how we destroyed the world in making these wonderful products that we love. Where did we get the materials from? How did we smelt them, turn them from what we pull out of the ground to something that's useful in manufacture? How did we destroy the air in manufacturing, or for that matter, the air, the land, the water? Plastics are really valuable. They make life a lot easier, but the plastics don't deteriorate, and they're mostly one-time use. And so that is clouded. I mean, the ocean is filled with plastics, and microplastics are in the air. When you drive your car, every time you drive your car, little particles come off of the rubber tires. And we breathe them, and that's really bad for the lungs. Now, that's a new topic. I didn't know that. But when I first learned about it, I said, oh, yeah, when a tire wears out, what does that mean? Where does the rubber go? Well, it goes in the little particles in the air. So we have to rethink everything that we're doing. And that's hard. But otherwise, it's first of all, it's making us unhealthy. But second of all, it's causing major changes in climate, which is causing, great havoc. Now, it's interesting. The United Nations have been having a meeting to discuss climate for 28 years now. And it's in a typical United Nations fashion, it's called COP, the Committee of Parties, which is a completely meaningless title for their committee. But they've been meeting for 28 years to discuss the climate change. And so how come nothing has happened? And for lots of reasons, though. That, first of all, the way the scientists measure is in a way that's not meaningful to people. They say, if the temperature increases more than 1.5 degrees, oh, horrible. What? It changes more than that every day. Because they're not talking about temperature, they're talking about heat. And they don't make it clear, and they don't talk in ways that the average public understands. So I finally have said, let me tell you the good part about climate change.
What is it?
The good part is that it's here. That it's causing fires and windstorms and floods and hunger. Why is that good? Because people are finally taking it seriously. And for the first time, we're starting to do something that might change it. But the magic word that people talk about is sustainability. And sustainability, it's too late. Sustainability means stay where we are, sustain the current state. Well, the current state is miserable. But we have to do something to stop, because if we don't do anything right now, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. So at least we should slow it down and stop it. And then we have to make it back up. So it's going to take quite a while, which means we have to start right away. So that's what the book is about. And I say its title is, let's design a better world, one that's meaningful, like the 1.5 degrees isn't meaningful to the average public, or the gross domestic product is a horrible way of measuring a country, because it's one number. First of all, it's a bad number, but second of all, a complex country, you give it one number. You should have a dashboard of information. That's what a company does with a business. You look at how you're well doing in this or that or the other thing. And so there's really good dashboards out. There's a group at Oxford University in England that's done a really good job of developing a dashboard to tell you how well your country or city or company is doing on many, many different attributes. And also, why do we measure everything? Well, there's a famous physicist who said, it was Lord Kelvin, who said, if you can't measure it, it means you don't understand it.
But that's not the whole sentence, right?
That's not what he really said.
Yeah.
Because he said a few words before that. You've read the book. He said, if it's in the physical sciences, but we're talking about society, we're talking about people, we're talking about living things, about life. That's very different. Because in the physical sciences, if I drop something, it doesn't matter how many times I drop it, it's going to go, I can predict how long it's going to take to hit the bottom and how fast it will be going.
Based on like 9.8 meters per second.
Per second. Yes, because it's accelerating. And, but if it was people are very sensitive to the history. Animals are all sensitive to the history. The world is sensitive to the preceding history, and that's why we have to know history. It's not that history repeats itself. It doesn't. But history determines the way we behave and think and act and respond. So that's the beginning of the book, meaningful. And then we have to do sustainability. As I said, it's a bit late, but we have to change the way we manufacture to the way that plants grow, for example. Plants grow and die, but they aren't junk. When it dies, the material becomes fertilizer for the next plants. And what we need to do is manufacture things so that we don't use new materials all the time. We reuse and reuse and reuse. We also repair and let things last longer and be able to modify and improve them without buying whole new things. Now, you can't just do that to a company, because a company's business model today is based on selling new things. So we have to change the model. As I said, we had to change everything.
You have to rethink, like if they want swappable modular parts that can be repaired and integrate that into the whole business model and design that, and that cascades to every other part of the business.
Yes.
Then it's possible, but it all starts with awareness, right? And the want to do it.
It starts with awareness, but also the other part of that is, yes, we have lots of modules, and so there's lots of business in making those modules and making them replaceable, but we also could consider it a service. So you don't have to buy the camera, you buy the service of the camera. Because what is a camera? It's really a service. You buy the device, but what you care about is what it produces. You care about, well, the recording it's making right now, or you care about when you go on a vacation, and it's my memories are in that camera that come from the pictures I've taken. So, but that's a service that we're providing. And so there are other models besides having to purchase absolutely everything. So
I remember your point around what they call this, like the workforce and the artificiality of the 9 to 5, and the pandemic triggered the move to a more distributed workforce, the rise of gig workers, and to us personally, like our company at Swarm, like we believe in just the output, right? Not the amount of hours you have to put in to deliver the output or the outcome. But, like this type of thinking applied to work or labor. So I know that's one of the SDG goals. I was just reminded of that.
The fact that we have to all start at the same time, end at the same time, and have fixed 40 hours or something per week, that came with the Industrial Revolution. Because everybody had to be in the factory at the same time. But why do we need it today? And it also makes us we're tools of the companies. And so we spend more time at work than we spend with our families. And that's crazy. And I like to use the metaphor of the farm. And I'm an expert at farm because I've watched lots of television. but if you look at it, well, in other words, I don't quite know what I'm talking about. But it seemed to me that in the early days of farming, there were no fixed hours. You could be with your family when you needed it to, or you had to attend to the crops or to the animals when they needed it. And so it wasn't that some bell rang and you had to wake up and do something. It's what the animals required, the plants required, or your family required. It was all intermixed. It wasn't, it was nice that you could go back and forth. And as you point out during COVID, well, we discovered that. We didn't always have to go into work. We could use video conferencing or do the work at home or only go into work once a week or something. It's good to get together with everybody. That's important. But by giving us more freedom, well, I could do the important things with my family in the middle of the day and maybe work in the evening and get the work done. I've always had that philosophy with my employees when I worked, that what mattered was getting the job done. I didn't care when they did it. And so we could change that and make it's quality of life. That would improve the quality of life. And then finally, colonizers are countries that went out and took over Indonesia, countries, Latin America, Africa. The rulers of Europe divided up Africa to little hunks, of countries. And they made divisions that make no sense of the ground or no sense of the people, but they allowed different countries to own different parts of those divisions. And we did the same in Latin America, the Spanish and the Portuguese especially.
We are in the Philippines.
And you are in the Philippines, and you've had all of that.
Our country's name is literally named after King
Philip.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, But
what I'm getting at is that's what designers do. Is that the colonists went in and said, the colonizers, "Oh, you don't run a government very well. We will run it for you." Isn't that nice of us? The British were especially bad at that. And But what we do is we set designers out to some problem and we say, oh, we understand what your problem is. So we'll give you the solution.
Very prescriptive.
And I'm saying, no, I don't. There are lots of intelligent people in the world who understand the problem they're living in. They even know what the solution should be, but they often need help in doing it. So I'd like to see design change from being the colonizers, saying, here's what you should do, to being the helpers. So what I do is I go in and if you need some expert advice, we'll bring in some medical people, or we'll bring in educators, or or bring in experts on materials. But it's your job, it's your life. You decide how you want to use it and what you should do. And so I think that we should be the facilitators and the enablers. And oftentimes, a problem, especially over like medical problems or public health, people can see the symptoms, but the causes are deeper and they're more difficult to work with, and that requires governments. And so the people may not be able to get the funding or to work with governments, and that's where local designers could be of value.
Bottom-up approach.
It's a combination of bottom-up and top-down. Yeah, you need both. So that leads to a different point, which is designers today don't have any power. Design is a field that doesn't have any specific topic of excellence, because what it is a field of methods, of knowing how to do things. But that's the power of design, because we can be called into almost any problem in the world. They're devising new policies, new laws, devising new waterworks, devising new this, new that, new this, because we come in with a method of experimenting and learning, but we also know who the experts are. We bring the experts in. But the problem with experts is they're expert in a very specialized area, and the people, they can't put it together. You need a generalist. You need, like designers, you can bring all the different experts together and create something. But designers don't do that. Now, I think designers ought to be in charge of the world in some sense, but you can't do that because you're a great designer. I can do great sketches, or I can my design skills are wonderful. No, you better be good manager, and you better understand the world and business, and you better understand politics. Ooh, politics. No, I don't want to care about politics. No, politics are good. I mean, politics are often done badly.
Yeah.
But the notion of politics is because when you get groups of people together, let's suppose they're all trying to collaborate and they all are doing the best they can, but they come from different backgrounds. And so what they believe is right or what is needed often conflicts with what others do. And probably every one of them is correct from their point of view. And so the art of politics is figuring out how to work together, how to get them to see the other points of view, and to find some kind of solution that makes them all happy. And that's what's essential. And I don't see why designers shouldn't be that kind of person, because there are other groups that do this, but they always emphasize money or schedule. And we emphasize quality of life. So that's the short answer to why did I write this book?
On power, I think what I personally believe in, and I've strategically coursed my career through, is designers becoming CEOs or stepping into positions that allow you to, pave your path beyond the confines of a design department. Because like when you're in a design, department and you're trained in graphic design or interaction design, you're focused on user-centered design. That's cool, making the experiences better, usable, but I realized once I stepped into the role of a founder that, wow, like I was kind of like naive to a certain extent. Because like I realized that the scope is much bigger. The potential for impact is much more. And what dictates where you go is your values.
as a person. I think your book is a great read for people who want to do that, but don't have a, let's say, moral compass. Your book talks a lot about ethics too, right?
It's interesting. In the design field, you almost never talk about ethics.
Yeah.
Ethics are critical. But ethics, by the way, are really difficult because the different societies have different views of what's morality. And and it isn't that one is right and one is wrong. It's appropriate to the way they live. And so that's a difficult topic. But by the way, what you just finished saying, you don't need me. I see you've got it.
Thank you very much. But yeah, it's tough when designers navel gaze on, you're very prolific around this, around obsessing over craft. I mean, craft in principle can be applied at a grander scale, but when it comes to designers, typically the notion of a designer is not facilitative. Both of us know that good designers know how to facilitate. They are political. They influence. They understand the dynamics of power. But what's your message to the younger folks who have not figured out any of this yet, or does not necessarily have the level of understanding when it comes to their potential role, right, in shaping society and the global landscape?
But let me also point out that craft is still essential. I still love the craftsmanship that great designers do. And I love the devices that they make, and I buy things a lot. And just looking around this room, a lot of the stuff is done very, very well. It's really well built and well designed and so on. And so that's how we start out. So the issue is we have to, a problem I face is after teaching designers and using this new book, they all want to go out and be CEOs and be this and that. No. You have to earn it, and you have to build your way up. So you start with your craft skills, and you start with your abilities, and then you can show how that can be applied to other things, and then you move up. You're not. This happens, by the way, in business schools when people get their MBA degree. They immediately want to go out and run a company. No. You need. Because what you learn in school is a starting point, but you learn a tremendous amount once you start working in the company about how the way things happen. It's not quite the way you were taught when you went to school or read in a book. And so you have to work your way up there, which is what you just described, in fact. In fact, that was how you did it. But for that matter, that's what I did. I started off wanting to build electronic circuits. And people, they got in the way, My stuff would work fine if it weren't for people trying to misuse it. Well, as you can see, I've changed pretty dramatically since then.
Behavioral change on your personal level. That's very admirable.
Well, I don't know if it's admirable. It was, look, I do a lot of stupid things and make lots of errors, and that's how I that's how I learn. You shouldn't be. I'm trying to tell people to be proud of their errors, as long as that is they recognize them and they realize that they did something wrong or there's a better way and they're learning from it, because I'm always learning. In fact, I told you a story in the car while we were driving here about teaching some students and one of them popping up and saying, "No, you're wrong," and that student was clearly smarter than me, and I learned a lot from that student. And that student has gone on to make a big difference in the world. But
became the father of
deep
learning.
Yes,
and was responsible for the chaos we face now.
No, that's not fair.
Okay, I'm just joking.
But basically, I like people always to be thinking about what they're doing and to be learning about the larger perspective of what they're working, so that they're always learning from whatever they're doing, whether sometimes you learn from successes, but you actually learn more from failure. Because when you do something successful, you say, see how smart I am. When you do something that doesn't work, then you have to sit back and wonder why.
Well, speaking of, successes and failures, I've noticed you set up a new award, the Don Norman Design Award. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as I get older and older and older, and right now I'm 88 years old.
Still very young.
My friend said, actually, I keep looking at some of my friends who are 94 or in the late 90s who are still active and doing things. So yes, I'm still young. My friend wanted to have an award in my honor. And so they hoped that we could find some people who have done a lot of great work over the years and give them an award. And I didn't like my name being used first, but second, no, it doesn't do any good to give an award to somebody who's famous, who's done good work. It's nice to get it, but it won't change anything they do. And the more I thought about it, the more it was that when you're just starting out, that's when you need the award. So why not give an award to people who are just starting? But I said shouldn't be design, because a design is meaningless all alone. What's meaningful is it's supposed to be a guide to what you're actually going to construct or build or implement in the world. And what's important is what happens in the world when you've built it or created it. Because it could be a system, it could be a service, it could be a set of rules. It doesn't have to be a physical object or software. But so these are practitioners, so I said, we will give an award to people in their early career at doing something for society. But they have had to do something, and we had to have enough evidence that what they're doing is actually going to be very beneficial. And that's what we did. We said, we don't care what your background is. We don't care how you were educated. We only
Or your
care-
age, right?
Or your age. It's just that this is the first time you're starting in this area. And what we care about is how effective are you. And we said, and we should also reward educational institutions or boot camps or other places where you learned about how to do this. So we decided we would give two different types of awards. One was we would recognize educational institutions. That's not a contest. But the other would be a contest for early career, what they are doing in the world to make it a better place. And they had to be things like the United Nations list of Sustainable Development Goals. And that's what we did. We got applications from 26 different countries. And I have 18 advisors all around the world. One of them in Singapore, 2 in Africa. And we finally got lots of applications, and we went through them all, and we ended up giving 5 awards for people in building projects. And I'm actually kind of pleased that none of them came from the United States, because I didn't care where they came from, but I didn't want people to think this was an American thing. And so they came from all around the world. And one of them in India, one of them in Africa, Pakistan, all over. And 8 educational institutions. Now, the major issue was there were some that applied that we said, no, you're a really good institution, but we're not asking that you be a good designer, that you be a good in traditional design or in human factors. We're talking about humanity-centered design. So some of them are told that we wait until you have more graduates so we can see that they're actually doing this kind of work. But Singapore Polytech was one of the people that got the award. And then we discovered there was a bunch of places that they didn't fit, but they were doing great work. They weren't early, because we had 2 early career groups in Mexico, and we had 3 early career groups in Pakistan. But they weren't quite right. It didn't feel early career because they were doing work with a larger organization, which was filled with experienced people who were guiding them. So we finally decided we're going to have a special recognition for groups that we couldn't categorize, but we thought were doing excellent work. There was a university, where was it? I can't remember what. Oh, it was in Mexico. that decided to turn the whole university into a green university, but it's like 100,000 people, and top administrators were doing this, but they were very effective. So they didn't fit our requirements, but they were doing what we cared about. So we gave an award to them, and we gave an award to the group, Centro 32, Centro 32 in Mexico, who did these 2 projects that we thought were wonderful. And we gave an award to Code for Pakistan, which did the 3 projects in Pakistan that we thought were wonderful. And we partnered with the Aga Khan Foundation and with a group that's called Commit Global, which is worries a lot about immigration all across the world. And what they developed, they started building digital infrastructure to keep track of things and let people communicate with each other. When there were floods, for example, you can bring in the different agencies where they know where to go and so on. But they realized that every country had to do that when there was a problem, and they had to build it from scratch. And that was very uneconomical, and it was difficult to maintain. So what they designed was a standard infrastructure. And so now they go into a country and they can put in the standard infrastructure. But more important, the hard part is keeping it going. It's easy to get money to build something. It's really hard to get money to keep it going. Even roads, it's hard. You spend a lot of money building roads, but not so much money repairing them. So what they did is they said, we will maintain it for you. And so they're working with with UNESCO, they're working with the United Nations, with countries and big donors for enough money so they can not only implement this for the countries that need it, but also keep maintaining it. That's very powerful.
That's a very powerful incentive system too. It motivates individuals who want to make an impact to humanity in the right way.
Yes. So we're really pleased about this. It's been exciting to me. It's been a tremendous amount of work, but just reading and seeing the videos, and in many cases visiting the groups, it just makes it all worthwhile. It's just wonderful. So that's what I hope I'm doing for the rest of my life. But who knows? Because I never know what I'm going to do. I never know what I'm going to do.
Got it. All right. A big part of our community at Swarm is our consulting communities of technologists, people who are in AI, software engineering, experience design, and product. And you've pioneered, the N&G, right? Like the Nielsen Norman Consulting Group. What are your thoughts now? You're still on the board. Maybe you still give advice to your group there, but there are a ton of consultants here who can have great impact on the world. Do you have anything specific in mind that you would tell fellow consultants? Because you were one of the pioneer experience UX consultants, right? For Xerox and...
Well, for example, the Nielsen Norman Group has to change its ways because when we started, we were pretty much alone in offering courses and materials. And it started, Jacob and I thought we would be consultants, and we would simply be, people would call on us and we go off for companies to help them. And it takes a long time for a new consultant, you probably know this, to get recognized and people to realize you're there and to hire you. And getting started is difficult. So we accidentally stumbled into the notion of giving courses. And that turned out to be very good. But it also meant it was difficult on the people who worked because we were giving courses all around the world and traveling. So it's not an easy life if you want to have a family, for example. But then COVID came along, and guess what? We couldn't travel, so we started offering the courses over video, and that actually worked. But at this point, more and more other groups are coming in and doing similar things. And so we feel that we have to change what we're doing and change the things we're teaching so that so that we're different, basically, so that we want to be better than our competitors, but also we want to be distinguished from them, what we do. So that's one thing we're working on. But I think that's what everybody should be doing, is thinking about what they're doing, what their skills are, what their weaknesses are, and what they really enjoy doing. Now, what you want to do is something that avoids your weaknesses, and that combines what you're good at with what you enjoy doing. And you want to find that unique thing that fits into the ecosystem, if you will, of businesses and consultancies and so on, that makes you unique. And I think we have found the way. It will be another year or two before it's really, because it takes a long time to get it established and to train new people and develop it. It's just starting now. For example, we were backwards in the use of AI. And then the first few papers we wrote about AI were not very good. But we're coming into a much more, well, as our own people learn, we're doing better. But I always tell people, too, that you ought to know for yourself what you're good at and enjoy and what you're not good at. And if you're not good at it, either you try to avoid it or maybe you can't avoid it. For example, I'm not good at making beautiful objects. When I design something, it looks like it was done by an engineer, because I am an engineer.
You're an electrical engineer, right?
Yeah. But the point being, because I know that, and because I know it's important to have beautiful objects, I myself only buy objects that are attractive. It means I always make sure that I have people who are skilled at that working with me. And so when there's a topic that you're not good at and yet you need it, you just make sure you have that expertise. Or in my case, you know what I was really bad at? Writing. When I was a student in school, I was told I would never succeed. And my MIT professors told me, no, my writing was incomprehensible. And when I did my PhD, one of my advisors went out and bought a book on how to write and gave it to me. But I decided that if I really wanted to be an academic, writing was going to be important. So I spent several years learning how to write. And it was interesting because I always thought that you were born a good writer or not. But then I discovered somebody who was a really wonderful writer who hated writing. And his first drafts were just as bad as mine. But he spent time working on it till he got, and that's, so it's just a skill like anything else. You have to just practice and learn. So that's what I tell other people. Try to avoid the stuff you're not good at, or figure out other ways around it. Either learn it if you need to, or get other people to help you. Speaking of which, I want to change education.
Tell us more.
The notion of STEM education is wrong. I'm well-trained in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but they're taught as separate courses. And so when you learn the mathematics, you don't know why you're learning it. Why can't we teach problems and not disciplines? And STEM, notice it leaves out people, leaves out ethics, leaves out history, leaves out humanity. But when I was a student, we were forced to take these other courses, which we hated. But suppose that, which I now love, by the way. I've always taught myself. I read a lot.
I'm assuming those courses were like liberal arts,
yes,
courses.
But suppose they were taught as a unit. That we're given a problem to solve, any problem you like, but it's one that's important. You have to bring in several different disciplines and learn to work with them as equals. And second, ethics suddenly becomes important. The costs becomes important. The schedule becomes important. The ability, quality of life for the people you're building for becomes important. Ethics becomes critically important. And maybe the history of the people that you're working for becomes important. So suddenly all these other topics that you hate, well, when they become important and relevant to what you're doing, I see. And that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to emphasize this learning through problems, because that automatically brings together all the different skills, as opposed to, I'm going to teach you this skill and that skill and this skill and this skill. And, you're going to know then how to put it together when you need it. No, you don't.
I really relate to this a lot. You visited, our university, Ateneo yesterday, and you're still gonna go at it in the next couple of days, at time of recording. What's interesting about the pedagogical paradigm there is, it's really a mix of all these liberal arts courses. They teach us philosophy, history, sociology, and anthropology, psychology. We even have courses on theology, and spread across, and everyone is required to take it. The courses that you want to take for yourself are those specialized courses, right? Like if you want to do enterprise systems or whatever, right? But I feel like to really thrive as a strategic class designer, and defining that is not just people who, draw pretty pictures, but people like you, right? Like you admitted you don't draw well. It really takes the culmination of understanding so many fields to affect change.
You don't have to be good at all the fields. You have to just know how those fields apply and make sure the people who are good are part of the team. Because the other thing about education is you're forced to do it all by yourself. And you don't learn to work with other people. And you're greater in how well you yourself have created something. Well, if you look at my books, there's hardly anything new in them.
Yeah.
What's new is how I put it together. And I'm saying, why don't we let people cheat? I'm asked to write a paper. Yes, I asked the AI system to help me. Yes, I ask my friends, you did this last year. Can I borrow your paper, take parts of it, and put it in my paper? And I want to encourage that. But it's not.
It's collaboration.
But today, you're not supposed to do it, so you have to lie and say it's your own paper. Whereas I'm going to encourage you to take from someone else's paper, but say so. This paragraph came from so-and-so, and this paragraph came from there, and then this is from Wikipedia, and this is from whatever. Because what people care about is, what did you put together? Is it useful? And so we also want to teach people to do things together as projects. And yet the professors always say, well, how do we give grades? How do we know how much each person did? Well, grades are silly. I mean, I understand why we do grades, but it's not an appropriate way to judge. What does it mean when you get a grade? I once tried this argument that I have little modules of knowledge, and if you wanted to get certified, you have to pass a test on this module. But it's a module that took 2 weeks to learn, and I can ask you just a whole bunch of simple questions and discover if you know it or not know it. And so I either say, yes, you know it, or no, you don't. And when you graduate, I just list the things that you know. And so anybody who wants to hire you says, well, what talents do I need? And can see. But there's no grades. And, maybe the better people will have more modules listed.
Yeah.
Or maybe more difficult modules. But everybody does what they're good at doing. And I once taught a course like this, and we said, if you want to pass this module and you don't pass it, that's okay. Well, study it some more and come back and take it again. And take it again. Well, if you do it 3 times, but then we say, no, you can't do it a 4th time unless you spend some time with a tutor who works with you. And I really liked that method, because I then knew what the person could do. If a person gets a B in a course, what does that mean? Whereas if I say, you know this, you know that, you know this, you know this, that's meaningful. And
it's more suitable,
but you don't know the other, right? Anyway, I want to change the world. Slowly. It'll take a while. So therefore, since it's going to take a long time, the first step is to convince lots of other people to help make a difference. So I'm inviting you to help make a difference. But see, the trouble with what you talked about the university that requires all this other stuff, that's a step in the right direction. But if it's not integrated together into a package students still don't know why they have to study these other areas. So I think they all should be together as integrated together. And the hardest part about doing this is the professors. Because the professors all are used to being rewarded for their special knowledge and not in combining it with other people. So they would have to learn new skills.
And they are so sub-specialized.
Well, we still need specialties, but we also need generalists, so we need both.
Yeah.
So the kind of problem solving is really good to start, because that way you learn why all these disciplines are important. But then you need to take specialties so you know a few things really well. Because I should know about programming, but if I want to be a good programmer, that takes a number of years of study and learning.
We like to pair the technical ability, let's say software engineering, and domain expertise, like let's say healthcare. Like we find that it's a incredible combination, and pairing those people with very unique knowledge as a domain expert and technical person, and connecting them to people who need it, that worked wonders for us.
That's excellent. But one little thing, because I learned this early on, when I would ask my programming team to do something, they would sometimes say it's impossible. And if it really were impossible, we shouldn't do it. But I know enough programming. I used to be a programmer myself, that I could distinguish between you really can't do it or it's just too much work. And so you need somebody you can push back. That's what Steve Jobs was famous for. His technical people would tell him that you can't do this at all. And he would say, I don't care, do it anyway. and they would always end up, because they were challenged and so on, they would end up, maybe the way that they were trying to do it is impossible. But they would figure out some way of accomplishing what was desired. So it isn't enough to be able to say, work with other people. You have to know enough about their field.
You were at Apple, like you were a VP, you became a fellow, and you were at the research division, I think the Tech Advancement Group. Are there any principles from Apple that you feel like could be useful to designers these days?
Well, that's a really good question. There were lots of good things and bad things, and things that I would do differently if I were in that role again. I thought that today, I think that we were too far removed from the product divisions, that we were doing research, but we didn't really understand the problems of the product divisions. I remember going to a medical clinic, a very famous one in the United States. We were hoping to install some of our computers there. And we had printers too. We could sell them our printers. But as I spent several days with them and went through their entire facility and watched how they did things, and I realized, no, there was no way we could help them. Because we were a consumer company making things for individual households. And when they wanted a printer, they took me into a room where there was a roll of paper that would barely fit in this room. And that was the paper they were feeding into the printer because they were printing so much, and it was a really high-speed printer. Whoa. No, our printers can't do that. And the same way with a lot of the computers, they weren't made for a business industrial environment. And so you have to go out and learn about how these things work. And doing that, and not enough people did that. So quite often our people would program something that was wonderful. I would go to the division labs and to the product lab and say, look what our people have done. This is wonderful for your group. And they would say, yes, it is. That's fantastic. Give it to us so we can ship it. Well, it's written in Lisp. That's an obscure programming language, and it's not made for a real product. It's really a good one for doing research, but it's not made for products. And well, then have them redo it. Well, they can't. And by the way, you know the example I showed you? It only works for that one example. It doesn't work for anything else. Well, come on. It has to work for everything. Yeah, but my people are no good at doing that. Because my people were, well, they were really good. Some of the world's best scientists, but that's it. They understood the principles, they developed them, they made wonderful stuff. But as soon as it could work on one example, they said, finished. I proved that I'm right. And so now I can go on to something else. So I began to realize at the end of my term at Apple, I needed a new kind of group, one that was in between products and research, that would transform the products into what was really needed, transform the research, and it was really needed to be in the world. Because the product groups didn't have time to do that, and the researchers were not competent to do that. In fact, one of my friends who ran the entire software group said he would never hire a PhD. He wanted people to do work. He said, I hire the PhDs. He didn't. Because the PhD, we have to ship this in 6 months, and the PhD looks at it and says, I think there's another way of doing this. Let me play around, right? And that's important and good, but it gets in the way of shipping the product. So you have to separate them out. But you can't separate them too far, or else they don't understand what the company needs. So it's funny. It has to be more integrated, yet still separate. So I think designers, though, fall into a little bit the more like the research end. They love their ideas, but they've never necessarily tried them out in the real world. They often do their designs in abstract. They don't build them. And unless you build the design, you don't really understand it. And then you have to test it in the world, and not with your friends, or not with, carefully selected people. Because every time we take our designs that we think we understand, and we've tested and tested and put it out in the world, we discover it breaks. People do things we've never considered. And I don't think many designers understand that.
I think I remember the concept of affordances, right? Like talk about Norman doors being able to for sure pull an object based on how it's created in software, or even in the physical realm. Like designers need to consider the negative things people can do or will do, inevitably do, whenever we create systems, when we design systems.
Everybody needs to think about the unintended consequences, or how people might misuse it. Because almost anything we build can be misused. And so it's impossible to stop it all, but it's really important to think about it and to do your best to try to make it difficult. Yeah. It's, I think design is a wonderful job, because you get involved in all sorts of different areas, and you are doing things to make a difference, but it's for the practitioners who are doing the difference. The academic designers, well, they're training the practitioners, but they often aren't experienced in getting things out in the world, so they don't know what really happens when you bring it out there, or why their wonderful ideas get transformed in the manufacturing. Lots of designers complain to me all the time. I did the perfect design, and then the marketing people changed it. And I say, well, then it wasn't perfect, wasn't it? And did you have a marketing team when you were doing your designs? No. Well, why not? Because if you understood what marketing and engineering, for that matter, needed, then you would have worked collaboratively, so they wouldn't have had to change it afterwards.
It's so crucial to not work in silos, and just work with all of the disciplines for the good of wherever you are.
When I was at Apple, we had people from 3 different groups that I added. It used to be engineering and marketing, but I added the usability and what we call the user experience group. That's where the name came from. And so they would all work together as a team, And what I really liked was that I would come in late at night to see them all working, and I wouldn't know which group they were in. That was so neat because I felt that basically whenever they came upon some issue, whichever person thought they were best equipped to do it would go off and do it. It didn't matter if they were in marketing or in this or that and the other. And so it was a really uniform group. They had different skills, but, you know, even programmers have different skills, different kinds. So that I think is the way it ought to be done.
All right. I think we have to wrap up. Don, you want to change the world? We're taking it one step at a time. What's your message to everyone listening to you?
Well, actually, I want to do thousands of steps at a time, or millions, by enlisting millions of people. So, you know, the United Nations has, they say they have 17 societal development goals. In actuality, they have 16. 16 issues that must be solved. Number 17 is what I'm talking about. Number 17 is these problems are so big, we must band together many groups to solve them. So each group takes a step at a time. But if we have thousands or even millions of groups, that's how we make rapid progress. But that's also a nice ending to this wonderful conversation, because we could keep going for days, as you can tell. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm Alexis. Thank you so much for gracing us with your insights and presence. All right, that's it.
I wasn't pausing because I didn't know your name. I was pausing because I couldn't figure out how to get my hands to fit your. But that's going to take a lot of editing.